Hey, it's the 40 Watt Garage. Welcome to the channel, or welcome back. This is probably the final installment on my braking and clutch hydraulic system reconditioning. All of the parts are bolted back onto the car. I'm going to fill the reservoir with fluid and then start vacuum bleeding the system. I want to vacuum bleed it to pull clean fluid through and flush out the lines, and flush out the calipers and the clutch slave cylinder. I don't want to do the pedal pump method because I just don't want to take the chance of drawing that old fluid back into the system. So we're just going to vacuum bleed it, or possibly even just gravity bleed it. Crack the bleeder screws and let nature take its course and just draw the fluid through. I've got the car up in the air, and I'll explain the rig that I've got set up here. This is my clutch slave cylinder, and I've got a piece of tubing pressed onto the bleed nipple, trapping a wrench so I can loosen and tighten it. That's going back here to a reservoir. It's got a little bit of clean, brand new brake fluid in it, and then the dip tube coming down in, so that if something goes wonky, I won't introduce or backsuck air into the system. And then I've got it hooked up to my vacuum pump. So, and I've filled the reservoir up top, and now I'm just gonna crack open this bleeder screw. And you can see, I hope, that the fluid, just by gravity, is starting to pull down. I don't even have a vacuum drawn yet on the system. And make a note of the fluid level here. It's about 5/8 of an inch from the bottom, where the canister is saying about 25 milliliters. But I am seeing bubbles pop out of that dip tube, and that is just air that's being pulled through my lines. So I'm going to give this a little shot of vacuum. Got about 2-3 inches on it right now. And these air bubbles that I'm seeing up here are probably pulling past the threads on the bleeder screw. There's not a lot I can do about that, but the objective here is to get this grungy fluid out of the slave cylinder, out of the stainless line, and get it replaced with clean, clear fluid. If you look in that reservoir, you can already see that it's getting dark and there's crud being pulled through. You just have to do this slowly, though. This is not a speed operation. Just have some patience. And another thing that is very important is to close the bleeder and go check on your fluid level up in the reservoir, because you don't want to pull that dry and suck air in at the top. Then you got a bigger problem. So that being said, I'm going to close off the bleeder and go check my fluid level. Okay, I have topped off my reservoir up above, reopen the bleeder screw, And I think I'm just gonna let this, now that I've got it, if you could say primed, or I've got the siphon. Yeah, siphon would be a more accurate term. Now that I've got the siphon started with a little bit of vacuum, I'm just gonna let this run its course and let gravity take over and slowly work this old fluid out of here. So stay tuned. Now this is after approximately a half an hour of pulling a vacuum on this, and I have pulled through approximately 75 milliliters, about that much, because you remember I had about 5/8 of an inch in here to begin with. And the first third of this was coming out really pretty gunky, and now the second third is a little cleaner, and the top third is pretty nice and clean. So I'm gonna empty this catch can, top off the reservoir up top again, and I'm gonna pull through another container's worth of fluid. And then I can be pretty assured that this entire circuit has got clean new fluid in it. So to change this out, I'm gonna close the bleeder screw, seal the system, relieve any vacuum I've got, and then I can pull this off without fear of it sucking air back into the system. Well, the same as we started before. Got a bit of clean fluid in the bottom of the catch can. Open the bleeder screw, pull the vacuum. And it's slow, but you can see the fluid level rising in the catch can. And it's nothing like that first batch of gunk that came out. This is the second catch can worth of fluid that I've pulled through. And as you can see, it is as clear as the fluid that went in up top. It looks a little milky here because it's the translucency of the container, but I have pulled through all of the clear fluid that I can. No more gunks coming out. So I am going to close off the bleeder and pour this out, and then hook it back up again. And I'll use the vacuum bleeder to pull down the level in my reservoir to the proper max fill line. Right now it's a little bit over full. So then rather than trying to suck that out or whatever, I'm just gonna drain it out until it hits the max full line, and then this system is done. Now my reservoir, my fluid level is at the max full line on the reservoir. So I've tightened up the bleeder, and this circuit is done. Got clean fluid all the way through. Now we get to move on to the brakes. Well, I saved the fluid that I pulled through on the clutch circuit. This is the first container that I pulled through into the catch can. This is the second container I pulled through. You can see that it's not only discolored, but it may or may not show up, but it looks like there's crud kind of in suspension with the fluid. This fluid is as clean as it came out of the can. Well, we've moved the equipment and re-rigged onto the passenger side rear brake, which is the farthest from the master cylinder and reservoir. And different fitting. It's a rubber cap that fits on the bleeder screw coming down to the catch can Same thing, dip tube, little bit of fluid, and a vacuum pump. So I'm going to crack open the bleeder fitting and introduce a little vacuum. And it looks like we're pulling a little air off of the bleeder, but we do have fluid flowing. And like we did with the clutch, I'm going to pull through a couple of containers worth in the catch can. Try to get as much of that old contaminated fluid out of the system. We're still working on the passenger side. This is the second catch can full of fluid that I'm pulling through. The air that you're seeing in the line is sucking past the threads on the bleeder screw, so there's not much I could do about that, and I really don't need to in this instance. A lot of times if I'm bleeding a system for the first time, I will give the bleeder screw threads a good smear of chassis grease, and that helps to seal them up a little bit, and you won't pull so much air, and you'll get a more of a positive indicator of how well you're doing. But I'm going to continue to pull another container through this side, then we'll button things up and move to the driver's side rear. Well, we're rigged up on the driver's rear, so do the same thing again, as we will crack the fitting, pull a vacuum, and now we're starting to pull fluid. Now, I think I'm gonna close this, get a new bite on that bleeder. Well, I can't. Okay. It's having trouble opening it because I'm either hitting the parking brake cable or I'm hitting the casting. I can't get the wrench on in a different spot, so we'll have to do with what we got. And since 90% of the rear brake lines have fresh fluid pulled all the way through to the farthest point, I think I'm only going to pull one container of fluid from this side, because I only have to replace from a junction block up on the body here pretty much just through my braided flex hose, and then whatever's in the body of the caliper. So I think one container will be more than enough to replace that fluid. The container on the left is the first pull from the passenger rear, which is the furthest location from the reservoir. And it's not terrible. It's a little golden in color. The container on the right is the first pull from the driver's rear, which only amounts to about 18 inches of line and the contents of the brake caliper. Right, we have moved to the passenger front wheel. We've got the brake bleeder rig set up. The rubber nipple on the bleeder screw, and we'll crack the bleeder open. The reservoir is full, and we'll start to pull a vacuum. And yeah, we got some nice gunky mud looking stuff coming out. That is definitely not clean looking brake juice. Well, as before, I'm going to pull a full container from the front, close it off, refill the reservoir, pull another full container out. The passenger front is the farthest away from the reservoir. We're on the second fluid pull on the passenger front, and already you can see that the fluid is coming out much cleaner. Container on the left is the first pull through the passenger front caliper. This fluid is only 6 months old, and it is already a dark amber orange. Almost looks like a good whiskey. And this is the second pull through the passenger front caliper, and that is just about as clean as it coming out of the jar. So we're going to move everything over to the driver's side. I'll get everything moved over to the driver's side, and we will crack the bleeder and pull a vacuum. And yeah, we have that nice gunky brown stuff coming out. This line is very similar to the rear on the driver's side. It's literally coming from a bulkhead fitting through the flexible line into the caliper. It's a grand total of about 18 inches long. So most of this gunk is coming out of the caliper, very little out of the line. But as before, we will pull fluid through until it comes out as clean as fresh out of the bottle. All right, this is our second vacuum pull on the driver's front. Not very much brown stuff coming out anymore. And I think I will let this run until it pulls through to the max full line on the reservoir, which is probably going to wind up to be about 3/4 of a catch can worth. It's already coming out very clear. Give this a few more seconds and we are done. Now the container on the left is the first fluid pull through from the driver's front. The container on the right is the second pull through from the driver's front. Again, this kind of looks like a good whiskey. And this is practically clear. Since I've already got a drip pan in place and the wheels off, I'm going to hose the calipers down and clean up and get some of this brake dust off, and then any little small amount of fluid that may have dribbled from the bleeder screws I'll get rid of. We'll put the wheels back on it and get it on the ground.